I'm Brandon Marchand. I'm one of the founders of the Spokane Home Guy Group. We've been in business since 2007. Actually known Adam for much longer than that now, and he's been a good friend and a good client of ours for many years, and I'd love to have him introduce himself real quick and kind of go from there.
Thanks for having me. My name's Adam Chronister. As mentioned, I've known Brandon for quite some time. He's been really good to us, and so I run a digital marketing agency called Enleaf here in the area, and much of the overhead of that company has helped me, branch into things like real estate and other investments, which I'm sure we'll talk about as we proceed here. So
obviously the topic is we sell real estate at the Spokane Home Guy Group, and we work with investment real estate. And Adam has always, and his wife Heather have always impressed me with their portfolio and their knowledge of real estate. Adam, tell me a little bit about how you got started into real estate investment, and then kind of give us the story.
Yeah, it started really early. Like, my spouse and I knew originally that we wanted to get into some kind of investment property, right? And so we originally went down the house hack process. We actually made an offer on a place and ended up backing out. It was a duplex. The top was, had to be completely remodeled. It was knob and tube. It was in a horrible neighborhood, and we kind of got cold feet, right? Now, this wasn't with you. This was with another agent at the time before we met. So that didn't work out, and then I think somewhere along the way we connected with you, bought our first property, and it was just a small, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, in a very good rentable area. In fact, all of our corresponding neighbors were rentals. And the full intention with that purchase was, hey, we're not going to live here forever. We didn't do what a lot of newly married couples do and buy their quote unquote forever home, which never ends up being your forever home.
Yeah.
Right? That's usually 2 or 3 homes later if you're, doing the American dream thing. So we bought that knowing that that would be a stepping stone, and kind of went from there, really.
So that home became an asset over time. You lived in it for a little while, and then ultimately moved on to another property, and then turned around and rented that property out. So what has that grown to today, if you don't mind sharing? What does real estate look like for you?
Yeah, so we have multiple multifamily properties in the Spokane area, and ironically just ventured in an overseas property in Costa Rica. And ironically, that first home was part of this sale that financed, kind of our dream of buying property overseas, right? And so, it took a long time, well over a decade to get there, but, a lot of it's just a matter of patience, right? So I've always looked at different ways to take my, more passive income, which is, part of what I do with the agency, and figure out ways to roll that into, more passive income. And I don't personally believe in any kind of non-passive income. There's people that will pitch that stuff online. I don't think it really exists, but there are, less passive incomes. And I think real estate is definitely one of those where you can have a full-time job. Both my wife and I work. She's a teacher. I run a digital marketing agency, but we run real estate on the side, and are managing all of that. And so it's very doable.
Yep, and you manage all your own properties, correct?
We do, yeah. Some days that's a little tough. I don't know. I think starting now, it's actually really important. We're still having conversations of when we want to cut the ties on at least management of all of those. The more you get, the more headache it is. And so, but yeah, for years we've done that, and obviously there's pros and cons, right? If you're managing it yourself, you're definitely taking home more on the income side. But then, you're doing nights and weekends and odds and ends and
clogged toilets.
Yeah. We tell people, I forget what we're up to, but we don't say how many doors we have. When people ask us about real estate, it's we manage, I don't know what it is. I don't think it's quite 20 toilets yet, but it
feels like 20.
Yeah. We do that. We don't talk about doors. We talk about toilets. How many toilets we manage, and it's much more of a humbling way to express it, right?
That's very true. And you mentioned one of the things is that you like to have your revenue working for you and your income working for you. And it's do you follow a philosophy, or what philosophy do you follow around that? There's so many around there. There's so many gurus. What's your mainstream philosophy around that?
Yeah, so I follow what's called wealth triad. I didn't invent it, this concept. The first time I heard it was from a guy named Brandon Marchand. I know he's been in a number of ventures. I think he just purchased a website called, I think it's capitalism.com. But before doing all of that, I heard one of his talks. He did a lot of this Amazon fulfillment stuff. And he just talked about like what he called the wealth triad. And I really clung on to that. It's this idea that you have your, be it your day job or your business, that becomes the mechanism to fund other investments. So be it real estate or stocks or cryptocurrencies, and that it becomes almost like a cyclical process where your passive income funds, let's say, real estate, the overhead that you have in the real estate that goes into stocks, and it just becomes this system where you have diversity that's kind of feeding into itself, right? And we've just been doing that for some time, almost not quite 2 decades, but getting close to it, right? And so real estate, for instance, has just about replicated, our income, or at least like past years' day-to-day income. So it is a lot of work, but also you sleep a little bit better at night knowing that, hey, if I, break my back or God forbid there's some kind of huge medical circumstance where you can't work, you have somewhat of an insurance policy, right?
Yeah. No, and that's great. It's like, if you look all the way back to like the richest man in Babylon enslaving your gold for silver and silver for bronze, it's like, it's one of those mindsets to make sure that you've always got it working for you. And it's very similar to what I've always believed is spend less than you earn, avoid debt, invest the rest, right?
Exactly.
And so those are like three basic rules that I've always lived by, and like the wealth triangle is like a really good mindset around that. Yeah. And you'd mentioned you invest with your spouse, and one of the things that I hear in real estate is, I do this but my wife, or I do this but my husband, and it's like, how do you two handle the investment together? Because from the outside look like a complete power couple as far as investing goes, but I'm certain behind the scenes there might be some conversations that maybe aren't on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, I got to give my wife a lot of credit. Like she does a lot of the day-to-day management for our properties. I'm trying to get more involved there, but yeah, she's just really good at managing a lot of the logistics. These days, I'm trying to do more of the day-to-day. I'm still not a great plumber, but I'm learning, right? And we have conversations and little debates on like, okay, I'm more on the like passive side, so I went into this thinking like, hey, let's just do property managers right off the bat, and she's more of a DIYer. And so we kind of meet in the middle. We've gotten really good at not necessarily like property managers at this point, but we have our go-to team of plumbers and contractors. And so outside of turnovers and the occasional like circumstance where we got to come in, really quick, we have teams around us of people that can come. Even today, like we had a plumber out at one of our places, and I probably could have gone and fixed this particular issue, but it becomes a pro and con, like, hey, that's time away from what I'm doing, and so you got to make those judgments, right?
Yeah. Well, so at some point you have to decide, like, am I gonna, plumbers maybe depending a couple $100 for a trip usually, and can I make more than that if I spend time here doing what I do best and let the plumber do what they do best, right? Yeah. And so we're in the same boat. Like if it's on my way home and it's a quick fix, sometimes I'll go do it. But it's, rental real estate, it's never really a quick fix. It's like
there's always surprises. Yeah.
You're getting the symptom they told you about after the thing they didn't tell you about for 2 months. Broke. And so that's one of the good things is like for a lot of people when we're consulting on the real estate investment piece of it, it really makes sense to have really clear communication, and both spouses really need to be on the same page to be successful, especially on the risk topic, right?
Yeah. I think we're not always on the same page on the how, but definitely on the what, right? Yeah. Like we definitely have like alignment on these are our goals, our larger goals, and our objectives as a family, as a unit, a couple. Sometimes in the minutia we have our debates, right? Like should we be doing property management versus DIY, and when do we pull the trigger on that kind of stuff, But it works out. I think that's the key. Like anytime you're going to business, whether it's real estate or not, with a family member or spouse, is you really want to keep a good eye on what is the overarching goals and vision, and the rest kind of sorts itself out, at least from my experience.
And I agree with that. And when you bring up the goals and your overall vision of life, and you said like you don't always, agree on the how, but maybe
Yeah.
the why and the what. And so what would be, how does real estate fit into that overall picture of what, your vision for your family is? Is it legacy? Is it wealth? What does that look like?
I mean, we used to joke, and it wasn't really a joke, but we used to joke that each house was going to be like the college fund for our kids, right? Well, now we have more houses than kids, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, part of it is like, I guess for me, like especially now that I see like income being reproduced just by real estate, I feel a little bit better knowing that if something happened to me, God forbid I get hit by a Mack truck, my spouse can survive and have this asset generating thing, right?
Yeah.
Number two is like, we have assets we're going to be able to hand off to our kids. And my kids are starting, not quite yet, but they come with us. They're part, you've seen them like at showings and stuff. Like they're part of the whole story. So, we're trying to instill into them that the reason that we can do fun stuff, go on trips, go on vacations, take a month off in the summer is because we work so hard, right? Hopefully that clicks in, knock on wood. But we joke, and again, it's not really a joke. It's like, hey, this is going to be your summer job, flipping, turning over units, painting walls. Like, just be prepared. Like, when you're handy enough to grab a brush or a screwdriver, you're going to be right there with us, right?
Yeah, that's why we don't need property managers.
Right, yeah.
DIY
we
your
wait
own
long
property
enough,
manager.
and they're going to be our property managers, right?
They'll be like, I mean, that's a great way to learn. Is like one of the perspectives too is like, I think you've met Rich over the years, and he's a very driven individual, and his big why is to give his daughter a different starting point than he had. And that's a huge deal. Like that, and she's involved in his investments and all that stuff, and so it's a really big deal to make sure that they know along there, and then for you the comfort of knowing, like, if we stepped out the store and got hit by a truck today or something like that those things keep generating revenue as long as you take care of them. So same with the business even, and that works really well. And so as the world changes and as things go and as we all get older, right, we're probably 20 years older than when we first met,
right.
Is like, what changes have you made over time, and maybe more specifically recently, to adjust to just different asset classes being available, all different rules around tenancy? Like, what kind of pivots have you made?
I mean, like in the real estate realm, I think the biggest pivot we've made is the property in Costa Rica. We're learning a lot, right? It's interesting because I think we went in maybe a little bit naive, thinking like we were going to make like tons of money off of it. But we sold an income generating asset for one that, quite honestly, is basically breaking even, and sometimes that's still questionable, and it's relatively new. And so we've also had to, that is our first property where we have had to have property managers, because we're not there but 1 month out of the year, and we're dealing with things overseas, like foreign tax laws and foreign legal stuff. And so it's been a pretty high learning curve. And again, the verdict's still out where that will go. But like, it's the same thing when we started in real estate too. Like, we didn't know what we were doing. And I think with investing, that's the thing. I think a lot of people never get into investing, whether it's real estate or stocks or crypto, because they're afraid of making mistakes. And I think when it comes to investing, you have to get over that. Like, you're going to make mistakes. And in business too, right? Yeah. You're going to make mistakes, and that's how you learn. And so you have to be resilient. A number of years ago, I started getting an interest in, stocks, and then eventually cryptocurrency. Still do a lot more in the stock realm, but it was just out of a desire. Like, I felt like we had a pretty good grasp on real estate. I was like, I want to understand another investment class, right? And so, if you have the right personality type, you don't have to stop at one investment form or another. And again, these things tend to fund each other if you allow it, right? And so, I just enjoy the process, right, of learning to make my money work for me. And I think that's the key, is like, instead of working for money, making it work for you. Harder than you worked, That, and I think that's a really good point of keeping your money working for you, as well as, focusing on like, what is the ultimate goal and what do we want to accomplish? And the thing that I like, and I hear the theme too, is like that you basically just jumped in. There's never a situation
where you have enough data
Right.
about a new property in Costa Rica
Yeah.
to where you know that I'm going to make this much money, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like I look back, and maybe you do too, to some critical points in my career and life where I've taken a risk and gotten outside of my comfort zone. And I was actually thinking about it last night. I was looking around and thinking, just reflecting, and I said, well, that decision would have traded all of this
Yeah.
for what, for
Right.
that safety that I would have felt in that moment.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like we have to jump out and take that risk. And it's a really good segue into a question I had. So I'm gonna ask a little early is like, what does your comfort zone look like now, and what are things that are pushing you out of your comfort zone today in investing, whereas maybe that first property did initially? Like, what does that look like today?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of already spilled the beans on
Yeah.
that. Is that overseas property?
Yeah.
That was a big leap into the unknown.
Sure.
Right? And so that was definitely, and still is. It's relatively new. We're, I think, just a little over a year of having that property. So we've been through one peak season.
Yeah.
And we don't deal with things like seasonality, with buy and hold properties, at least here in Spokane, because they're live-in. So that's definitely been a new endeavor. Like on the other side of things, like I invest in a lot of like growth and tech stocks, right? So I really enjoy trying to find and understand trends and getting ahead of them. That's been very beneficial for me. Just trying to be ahead of the curve and learning. Like, we were talking earlier about the market and what it's doing. And so I think sometimes as you get more savvy into investing, whether real estate, stocks, crypto, whatever it is, understanding market dynamics, because they do have an impact on when and how you should make decisions, So it never hurts to have some data, but you don't have to have all the data, and you're never going to have all the answers, but learn what you can and then jump out and take a leap for the rest. And most of the learning is going to happen as you're doing it, right?
And you're never going to really time any market, no matter what asset class you're in.
Yeah.
And so like seasoned investors will tell you is like, one thing I've learned over 20 years of being in real estate is that the biggest thing that we got to do is just stay steady at it. And the people that I know that do the best, they're always investing. They're always looking at investing. They're not waiting for the next market or the next interest rate. They're finding the investment in the market of the moment, and they're making the best play they can, because the real risk is playing it safe usually.
Yeah.
So
kind of a cliche, but it's honestly like very true when you're talking about investments. Don't roll your eyes, but the best investment is yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like
Don't really.
and it's funny because I kind of forgot, but one of the things I'm looking at now, and we'll see where it goes. It's very new. It's just a couple weeks, but I connected with a mastermind community around buying and selling businesses, right? And that's just another one of those things where it's like, what are other verticals that I can leverage as far as investments? And so we'll see where that goes. But again, I think a thirst for knowledge and reading and understanding, that also goes a long way in your investment journey. Just being interested in the whole process as a whole will also benefit those people that are interested in this whole world of investments.
Yeah, I love that, and I love I've watched a lot of your content. If you look him up online, and we'll tag him on everything too. But like one of the things that you talk about is like treating like everything you do kind of as an investment of your time.
Yeah.
And is this time going to get me something that I want? That's going to move me towards this vision I have for my life, or is it going to move me farther away from it? Down to everything you do, because everything's an investment of our time, and even more so our attention.
Right.
And so it's a really good reminder, to not only invest in yourself, but make sure that you're, staying focused on the things that are important in your life. So, do you have any other questions for us, or anything that you'd like to ask us?
Speaking on the behalf of maybe your audience, what do you like to see in, what qualities are you looking for as far as when you're advising somebody on investment properties? What are the good questions to ask? What are good foundations or frameworks for that kind of thing?
Yeah. When we work with an investor, it's really important for us to know what the goal is. And so if you're looking to build a legacy, or you're looking to build income in the future over time, those are really helpful things to know. And Also, it's really good to know expectations, right? And you and I talked about this on our walk in here, is that real estate, business, all those things are more get rich slow, right? There's not like you don't hear of many people who have 1 or 2 plays in real estate and then, they're driving the Ferrari and all that stuff. And it's like, I bought and sold a lot of properties. I'm not driving a Ferrari. And so it's like,
that's probably why you can afford the properties, right?
Yeah. And it's a patience thing. And so like what I'm looking for, and even your Costa Rica property, like we've all bought properties that didn't cash flow in the beginning. Yeah. And we used sound business practices and try, fail, adjust to get those to where they're profitable ventures now. And then the market does a lot of lifting for you over time. Like over time, as Costa Rica continues to develop and more people visit and all those things, your revenues will go up and peak season will be longer, all that stuff.
So. Well, and the other thing I should note about that property is like that's way more than just an investment property. Yeah. There's a whole nother layer of investment. My wife's a teacher. I can work remote, so we take our family there every summer. We're about to head out here in a couple weeks for a month, right? And yes, we can and have been doing that, renting previously, but now we have something we call our own, right? Yeah. And so, money is one thing, but the memories and the time that we get, like, I have both my kids riding surfboards now, and so it's not. That's the thing too, is like I think with a lot of this, like you have to really understand your why. Yes, we all want to be financially secure and feel like we can sleep good at night knowing that the bills are covered, but if that's your only why, you're missing other opportunities, right? So
yeah, you got to be able to go after the things that are important for you, and literally spend money on things that don't seem like great investments, but actually create a lot of happiness and joy and value in your life to do that. So it's super important to be able to do that, and we like to work with all sorts of people on there. And well, as we wrap up here, do you want to tell us how we reach you and how we get a hold of you and a little bit about your company there?
Yeah, so I'm pretty easy to find. You can either look me up personally, Adam Chronister, or via our agency Enleaf. It's enleaf.com. We do digital marketing, website design, help businesses with their growth. So that's kind of the key of what we do. And if you're interested, I'd love to learn more about you and your business endeavors. So.
And if you'd like to talk about real estate investing, we'll give us a holler, and the links will be all around this video. So thank you much.